Shouldn't be too long. I am gonna motion for, but I'll for sure because I already sent them.
Okay. No, I'm just
Shouldn't be
making.
too terribly long.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just want to know my own time. I just want me personally.
Yeah, I'll go. I'll go.
Meetings
Yeah.
went last. So last about an hour and a half, 2 hours.
Hour and a half. Yeah, at most. Yeah. Okay. Everything there? Okay, okay. We're gonna get started in like a okay. Hello, testing, testing. All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Can the folks on Zoom hear me all right? Thumbs up, thumbs down. SGS staff, can you hear me? Oh, so can the people on Zoom not hear me? All right. Well, while we figured that out and everything, thank you everyone for coming. This is the Student Regents Town Hall. Yeah, so this is just an opportunity to meet and greet our two student regents, Sonia Brooks and Josiah Bahari. They're going to be starting off by talking a bit about the student regent application that's going to be, oh, is the video going? No, yeah, the room configuration is kind of awkward because this is our usual setup for USAC, and yeah, but like feel free to move forward and everything. But yeah, yeah, this is just gonna be a quick opportunity for student regents to talk about the student regent application that's currently open, and then we'll move on to a community Q&A where will be moderated by me. So folks both in person and on Zoom will be given the opportunity to help ask questions during the time that we still have them and everything. Sound good? Beautiful. All right. I'll pass the mic off to our student regents then to introduce themselves and start talking about the student regent application.
Yeah. Good morning. Good evening, everyone. It is so good to see you all. It's been a really long day. I apologize if I feel slumped right now, but hopefully this will kick in by the time we're ready. But my name is Josiah Bahari. I'm a second year PhD at UC Merced, studying interdisciplinary humanities, and this is my second year on the board as your student regent. Yeah, that's me.
Are you on? Sorry, I'm glad I didn't say anything bad. Hi, y'all. I'm Sonia Brooks, UC student regent, fourth year graduate, sorry, fourth year PhD candidate, and second year MPH candidate here at UCLA. Great to see all of you.
Yeah, if y'all want to just quickly go into the student regent application, like that aspect of it, and a bit of what y'all do in your positions.
Of course. So applications are open right now. They close on March 10th is the final day, and so the application is pretty straightforward. Like a regular college application, you'll have your essays and you'll have to get some letters of recommendation. Throughout that, you'll go through three processes, which is the first round application review, which is just your council of presidents, all the presidents from undergrad across the UC, then UCSA and UCGPC, their EVPs will interview you in your second round, and then your third round will be in front of a committee of regents choose you. Some things that we like to talk about in the role is that it's a great place for student advocacy. If you're really passionate about education and advocating for students and bringing your unique perspective, whether that's your identity or your major, whatever it is, your background, bring that into the experience because that's what really pushes you and makes you stand out. Tony, do you want to tell them about the perks? Also, it's a great networking and get to travel around.
Yeah, and that's one of the main perks, right? Is that you get to go to all of the campuses and meet the student body, as well as have your tuition paid for 2 years. Um, and that also includes free parking in any parking lot here on campus, as well as any of the other 10 campuses. And you also receive a monthly stipend. And yeah, I think that's it. But that's a lot. That's a lot. Yeah.
A little bit. If y'all have any questions about the role, please let us know.
And why don't we tell them a little bit about what it is that we do in our roles? Go ahead.
So, our day to day really looks like meeting with students. We go on these campus visits, hear the issues. We're not really here to help specifically what's happening at UCLA. We're here to advocate for that stuff. But what we do is we really find threads of system wide issues, and then we elevate that to the board where we either bring up policy or aid in conversations or just help. Elevate that to the top level because we see thematic things happening across our campuses. And so that's a little bit about what we do. We sit on committees ranging from national labs to audit compliance, et cetera, to just get involved in some of the more day-to-day issues that follow under that. Yes.
And we also, I think one of the main perks of this job for me is not necessarily speaking on behalf of 300,000 students and almost 500,000 employees. That includes faculty, staff, and administrators, and so on and so forth, that make up the entire UC system. It's over 1 million plus people, but it's having the opportunity to meet with students like this. So I really look forward to the campus visits or to the emails or to the phone calls or to people coming to office hours or, just to be able to relate and engage with the student body. Because again, I never want to put my own or push my own agenda, but definitely have a feel for what it is that the students want. And I think the other thing that is so wonderful about this position is finding that common thread with all of the UCs that either, they may have the same experiences or some campuses have experiences that others don't, but being able to find that common thread that not only um, allows us to relate to one another, but it's also a platform upon which we can advocate for. So yeah, so there are a lot of perks, and be ready to travel a lot. I think in the month of February and January, every 3 weeks we were in like 4 different hotels, right? So there's a lot of travel. So not only to the campuses, but to Sacramento often, to DC, to other events that are going on in conferences around the country. So there are, again, a lot of perks, a lot of opportunities. And the overarching theme for me is learning, right? I'm getting to learn not only about the governance, about the UC system, but also what makes each campus or the individual student body tick, um, and how to help. Yeah.
All right, lovely. Well, thank you, Sonia and Josiah, for explaining a bit more about the student region role and also the application. For anyone that is interested, please make sure to follow up on that. But now we're going to be moving on to the Q&A session. So prioritizing folks here in person, but I'm also keeping an eye on the Q&A on the Zoom. Again, just to reiterate guidelines, for people on the Zoom, please raise your hand using the Zoom feature so that I'm able to promote you to a panelist so that you all are able to speak and address the board. And then for everyone in person, just please go up to the mic here in the center. Make sure that you're speaking into it. Adjust it if you need to. But yeah, it's I'm just gonna like base it off of like who wants to go up first and everything. I know it can be intimidating, but trying to have it be as chill as possible. No, like they got a question. Oh, Chris.
Yeah, to start, I think this question might be useful to everyone. But how do you think or could you tell us about like how students from the UC system can reach out to you if they have questions, concerns, if they want to talk about anything?
Yeah, so definitely through student government is first and foremost because we try to meet with them regularly and through different student organizations. We're constantly meeting with, I just told you personally, but to everyone, like Sonia's and I schedule a really like 5 a.m. to we're out sending emails to 2 a.m. Like we're constantly meeting with different student groups and constituents. So we're always free via email. And so you could always reach out to us that way. We're also free through, UCGPC and UCSA. So the organizations who represent undergrad and graduate students, we reach out to them a lot and work through them. And so that's kind of some of the ways. And then we're really looking towards engagement through, like, we're always going to conferences constantly. You'll see Sonia and I have been to pretty much most of UCSA's conference. We're just at Students of Color, and we'll always try to like be there, either presenting or like educating ourselves and others on the role, etc. These campus visits is a good way to engage. So we're constantly making ourselves available to meet with students in that capacity.
And I would also say invitations. If there are events that are going on, what what we tell students, invite us because we don't know what we don't know, right? And it's another opportunity to not only get to know us, but us to get to know you. And what is it that, either we can advocate for or how can we, be of service? So those are the ways to really not only get in contact with us, but to be engaged. Yeah. Yes.
I just want to say thank you for inviting us out first. In community college, I was very involved with like SSCCC. I attended the ASAC National Student Advocacy Conference 2024, I believe. And so I'm very interested in hearing about what kind of initiatives you are advocating for at the state or local or national level.
That's a great question. Um, what aren't we advocating for? I think I think the number one thing that we're always advocating for are basic needs, and basic needs not only in the general term, but for populations that are often left out of the equation. And that can be for specifically a number of groups that I'm working with currently right now are students with dependents, working with veteran students, I'm working with disabled students. And a lot of times these, how do I say, these equations that are underneath the basic needs umbrella does not count the people that we as students have to take care of. So they may count us, but if we have dependents, and that can be children or parents that we're caring for, or siblings or whomever else, it does not involve them or include them in a lot of the initiatives or what have you. So we're definitely advocating for them. We're also advocating for undocumented and international students. We're also advocating for free speech. We're advocating for, like I said, it's probably easier for me to say what we're not advocating for than what we are. Yeah, so we see, because we go to the different campuses and meet with different people, we're able, or we have that vantage point, right, of what's really needed. And like I mentioned before, finding that through line that connects us all allows us to really be able to advocate and say that not only is this impacting, let's just say, for instance, UCLA, but it's also impacting Santa Barbara, San Diego, Berkeley, and so on and so forth. So, yeah, Josiah.
Yeah, well, and there was something Sonia mentioned at the beginning of this that I think is a really important part. I think like people focus a lot on the first part of our title, which is the student part, and forget the second part, which is the regent part. And also, like, we represent, like, and she mentioned that the staff, the faculty, and we're trustees to the state of California. So, like, we, like, literally, it's in our regental constitution that our job and our duty is to represent the taxpayer of California. That's like bylines when we go through our trading, that's what we're told. And so we don't even just, the buck doesn't even stop or start with students. It really extends towards staff and faculty because they're on the front lines of our students. And we know that if our staff are doing good, then that means our students are doing good. So that means advocating for equitable opportunities for our staff in terms of pay, housing, getting up in opportunities, our students getting into our staffing and our workforce workforce. So that's been really something that we've taken up on the helm this past year is truly and honestly advocating for staff and faculty as equally as students because it's a piece of the puzzle that I think people forget that we also have to advocate for in our position.
Hello? Yeah, there you go. Hi, thank you for being here today. My name is Joshua Bonsas. I'm a second year transfer student. And my question for first for Sonia and then for you is when you took on the student regent role, what I guess has been the learning curve as a student regent designate? And then like same for you, what has been the learning curve from being a student regent designate to now a voting regent?
That's a great question. I think from the moment that I stepped foot into the Regent space and really started talking and meeting with them, the biggest myth that I had was thinking and or believing that they knew everything at the student level about what was going on. And there was really nothing that I had to say because they already knew. That was the biggest myth. Um, and when I told them from a student perspective about, certain issues, they were all ears and eyes and were like, wow, I didn't know this. Can you give me either more information or more data? Can I meet with students? Can we talk about this more? And I'm like, wow, I thought you already knew about this, right? I didn't think that it was because you've discussed it. So I assumed that they knew. And so being in these spaces, it's remarkable, so to speak, that they really rely upon the voices of the students to really understand what's going on because you have to understand that at these regents meetings the only people that they see giving reports the majority of the time are chancellors, are the heads of the departments, are the vice provost or the provost, right? And so you really don't see that many students coming to give a report or a slideshow. And I think that's the reason why not only the speech part is so important, but also being a student observer is so important. And also being a student regent is so important because you are able to give these perspectives and be the site for a lot of them when they don't have that capability of being on every campus all the time, every day, right? So that's what we're there for. So I think that was the biggest myth, just assuming that they knew everything from the student perspective, and they didn't.
I think for me, and this is maybe a myth sometimes for us and also other students, has definitely been the amount of imposter syndrome you feel when you go into this space because I knew I wouldn't be comfortable because it's not where I'm from. Like I just came from a grassroots level, never really been on something like this, especially around people like this. But man, is that imposter syndrome really real, right? Because you're there and for Sonia and and the reason I reflect on this is I'm really writing a piece right now on my experience as a student regent and being on a board at this level. And for Sonia and I, we're both first. Sonia's the first Black woman to be student regent. And for myself, I'm the first undocumented and first student regent from UC Merced. And I think it comes with this level of honor, but it also comes with such a high level of responsibility. And that responsibility sometimes is really scary, right? Because our responsibility is to make sure that there's a second, third, and fourth, because we're now opening the door for that to be. And in this piece, I write how, I mean, most people's interaction in a space like this, undocumented, is people who clean their houses, which I used to do. I cleaned houses as an undergrad to put myself through college, or and with people like this, or through just their work, like people on very low levels. Of their companies and businesses who they don't think about. And so it's a difference when you're among them versus now you're on the board with them. And there's this level of imposter syndrome that you really have in the position of like, wow, this feels like unreal sometimes that I'm here, that I'm having these conversations. And as I'm writing this book right now, I'm going back on some of my notes and I would literally like write jokes and notes out before I talk to some of them because I was so nervous to like, I'm like, how do I talk to this person who is like, owns companies and freaking runs hospitals? Like, I don't know how to talk to people like that. I've never had to talk to people like that. I've just had to clean their house and go home, like that's my interaction. And so now I'm like, just really self-reflecting on my time and my journey and now that I'm finishing up my board and I've grown a lot. I do Sonia's thing now. She taught me this growth, and I've been doing it. Try it. It feels good. Growth. And so a lot of growth in this job and learning who I am and what it means to have people like us in this space and the amount of response because there are people who sometimes want us to flip tables over, but like we already know what the news says about undocumented people. So like when I do something like that, sometimes I'm just proving the narrative wrong and I'm just like, man, they already think like we're, stealing their jobs, coming for their families, we doing this and that, all the things that we're not. And so you have this responsibility to show them like this is who we really are, just a genuine person. So I hope that answers like a huge myth, but a little bit of vulnerability from what it's been like.
Yep. Thank you guys so much.
Hi, Josiah and Sonia. Great seeing you guys again. I just had a question in terms of like updates and like support for undocumented students. Obviously, like with the Opportunity for All campaign and the AB 2586 being vetoed. Obviously, I know we were probably expecting this from the Trump administration, and I'm kind of curious as to like what the Regents' kind of short-term and long-term plans are. I know just like in terms of anything else in terms of policy coming out of the Trump administration, it's just of like playing the waiting game, waiting to see like when all of this potentially stops. And I'm just kind of curious like how that is in terms of like undocumented students in the undocumented community across the UC. Like, are you guys just kind of like waiting it out per se, like in like, or are you guys like is there already a solid plan? Is there kind of like a lawsuit, kind of similar to the DACA DHS suit? I'm just kind of curious to just provide more transparency for the students here.
Great. This is a great question because I actually just was in a working group for undocumented students this week, and we are still expanding opportunities like experiential learning. And now we're starting to, this next Regents meeting, we'll be having a meeting on expanding CalFresh like opportunities for undocumented students, like Davis and UC Merced have started doing, well, Davis being the first campus and Merced following after that. So we're going to be talking about the expansion of that. In terms of what the UC is doing has been very like informative and communicative. So they launched, their federal updated website where now they're tracking every single executive order, telling you what is, what isn't. They have on Instagram, I follow them, and a lot of our undocumented students I know personally at UC Merced has started UC Immigrant and Legal Services that have been constantly posting on Instagram. Now on the UCOP website, they even have a tab that wasn't there before for undocumented students, and in that it has like updates on what is real, what isn't. I'll give you an example. The other day, Trump sent out that memo that he's going to start this registration process where undocumented people have to register themselves, and so which is so reminiscent of the Holocaust. It's kind of insane the time we're living in, right? But you see, like right away, like literally within hours or a day, said like, no, this is not true. These are the facts. This is the data, etc. So on those pages and on the website, they've been really communicative. And I've talked to the directors of the undocumented centers, and they are having weekly meetings all the time. I'm always sending them resources. I got on the agenda for this Regents meeting recruitment for undocumented students because it's been on such a decline after DACA ended in 2017. And so, even more so now, we're seeing students not go to college and drop out. And so, we have a committee session on that at this Regents meeting, and I'm going to high schools next month, and child, damn, my schedule just feels insane. I can't believe. So we're going to high schools to talk to undocumented students. I'm working with some undocumented networks like US Dream.us, Immigrant Rising, to really talk to students right now and tell them that higher education is really a great path for us as undocumented people and the opportunities that it can present. So there's a lot that they're actively trying to do. And I know it never feels enough during a time like this, because how could it ever? And so I want to acknowledge that it won't ever be enough until we have a shadow like that's not over our heads. And I wish that we didn't during this time.
I have a question. Surprise, surprise. Yeah, so since we've been so much on the topic of the current political climate, especially with the federal government, kind of want to ask something along the lines of, with the recent attacks that have been going towards diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, especially considering the fact that majority of the Board of Regents does not have a background in education. A lot of them are CEOs of random corporations. Random corporations and the like and everything. I want to ask from like the student region end, especially like what conversations are happening in the background in order to protect like student initiated programs, DEI programs, for example, like our resource centers and everything, especially considering that there's such a huge gap between like the connect that the regions as a whole have to the student body, for all 300,000 students and the other staff, faculty that you all manage, etc.
Yeah, so right now, and we had a lot of discussions about this today. Because of Prop 209 in California, UC has really been pragmatic for years about its way about going around diversity initiatives that don't deter or hurt ourselves under the law. So we've kind of been dealing with this since the 90s. So we are more in a safe space. That doesn't mean that we're not being pragmatic, and there's a lot of conversations about renaming things and how do we have more inclusion so we're not being, in the spotlight. um but that being said, I think like we are doing a lot of risk assessments right now to see, where are potentials that we're being harmed, and we're finding that it's very limited, but even in those spaces we are having conversations about changing it. I mentioned this a couple times earlier, but for you all as public, a federal judge recently put a injunction on what Trump was trying to do just 8 days ago for DEI initiatives. And so obviously the Trump administration is probably going to appeal that, and their, I guess, goal is to let all these executive orders go to the Supreme Court. But we're going to see a lot of challenges, and I wouldn't be surprised if the UC ends up challenging it, like we've been going on. What other challenges, especially for funding for graduate students and the research that we all do. And so I think that's where we'll see in the future. What was the three words they told us today? It's going to be legal, communication, and you remember the last one? It was something, but we have like a three-pronged approach for how we're doing stuff. It's really communication, legal, and one other aspect that we shall remember at some due point. But yeah, and Sunny, do you want to?
So the overarching message that we're receiving, again, is status quo, right? Things will continue as they are because we've been very intentional about how we have engaged policies and how we've engaged admission since Prop 209 was enacted in 96. So everything that we have been doing since then abides by the rule of law, so to speak. So we've done away with race, we've done away with ethnicity, we've done away with so many of these other things, especially in our admissions process. And so, even in our hiring process, that which I just found out or was substantiated today, that a lot of it goes according to what you've done, your history, like your work history or your experiences. And so that's what they base their decisions on. So by us being able to follow that rule, we are definitely under the auspices of the law. So there's not a lot that we have to change. The only thing that, and I made mention of this earlier as well, that if anything does have to change, and this was an example that was used earlier with us, that UCLA has one graduation for everybody, right? And if specific affinity groups want to celebrate those accomplishments or the accomplishments of their specific groups, then they can. But instead of saying that this is a graduation, they would say it's a celebration. And that was just an example, not saying that that is what is coming, but that was just an example of the level of inclusivity that UCLA has and will have to have in the event that there is more information that comes from the federal government about our wording. Um, so yeah, I think that's it.
Yeah, just kind of echoing what Javier said in terms of just a lot of the regions not having experience in higher education. Um, I'm just kind of curious, have any besides like or like have you both or any of the other regions been advised or consulted in terms of like student enrollment per ethnic groups or race? Um, just kind of have you guys talked about that considering a lot of the UCs are already or becoming Hispanic serving institutions or possibly becoming Black serving institutions, which was a new law that just passed in the California legislation. So I'm just kind of curious, is there like a new discussion? Because obviously, like as you're mentioning, like we're remaining in the status quo, but is there anything happening moving forward? Have you guys been consulted and advised? Just kind of curious on like what the game plan is in terms of like student enrollment and increasing like the numbers of marginalized students here at the UC.
Well, we're going full throttle. I mean, like, it's not stopping us because, one, it's not harming, it's not like we're specifically admitting students based on their race, right? It's about strategic recruitment from communities and places that yield other ethnicities and backgrounds and races. And that's the basis of a lot of what we do already. But Sonia and I sit on two different committees for both our identities. I sit on the Anapeasy committee to see how we can really get we already all our campuses are NPZ, but like when we disaggregate that, we see that some communities are way more represented than others, and so we're really looking at that a holistic approach about how do we diversify our NPZ campuses, and so I sit on that, and then so does Sonia sit. Sonia sits on the committee for Black recruitment, and she could tell you a little bit about the work they've been doing there. But um, the UC is not stopping what they're doing, from what we're hearing, because they haven't been doing anything that's illegal, again, under Prop 209 for a really long time. And I think that the regents are very passionate about, like, I know it may not seem like it, you may not hear it, but there are some regents that go really hard on this diversity thing. I mean, I'll just like some of them who are personally close to Sonia and I, like Garrett Elliott, for example, has gone really hard on our campuses and their admissions when it comes to diversity and not being satisfied with some of those numbers, especially for Black students. And so there's a lot of passion behind that from our board of wanting to see a diverse faculty and a diverse students. Sometimes they just hear the cookie cutter answers that Sonia say the admin or UCOP will give them of like, oh, like we're trying all this. And then they'll hit them back like, are we really? Because then the numbers should be reflecting that.
Hello. And I think, so to answer your question, yes, that data is shared with us. I won't say that it's shared like every meeting. I think if it's something that's going on, then that data is shared. I think the challenge with that data being shared, to where we can see which populations are either decreasing or increasing, is that the data at the graduate level is always horrible. And I don't understand why, right? Because the graduate students do make up a large percentage. of the student body, right? And a lot of the research and everything else that goes on. So that data, and we're having a meeting with the person that you know, gathers that data to really promote more graduate student data that is collected. The other thing is that we did see a drop in undocumented students applying. And I think we all know why, which is one of the reasons why we're making an effort to go and speak to, you know, like high school students and even reservations to still, you know, pick that back up, right? Or still have them apply. And then the other thing that is mentioned that is not really talked about a lot is the enrollment that the institutions do based on ethnicity, which is just, it's incredible. Because certain populations have stayed at the same percentage rate regardless of the number of applicants. So for instance, one of the challenges that is being experienced by the Black student population right now, and the only reason why I'm speaking about it is because we just came out of a session. And so they're basing the enrollment um, percentage on the population of Blacks that live in the state of California. Um, and the number of applications that they've received, let's say a decade ago, have quadrupled since then, but still the same amount of students are can only be accepted. And this is happening for a number of ethnic populations, which is extremely disappointing because we're measuring the amount of people that, and we all know that a lot of people are leaving the state of California, right? Because it's just too expensive and all this other stuff. But if we're basing the amount of students that we admit on the population of that particular group in the state of California, we're missing it. Right. And so these are some conversations that we will and we will continue to have at the regential level because they have to be adjusted. And then they also, if we're doing this thing of removing DEI, does that now mean that more of these students will be admitted because they're meeting the threshold, they have the GPA, but you can't accept them because now you're over the quota? Does that make sense? Which really is antithetical to what the critics are saying, right? And so you have to think about it that when people are saying, well, we have to get rid of these programs, they're not really understanding, especially from a UCLA perspective, that we not giving nobody, you know, special preferential treatment to get up in here. You can look around the room. I think I'm the only Black person up in here. So you cannot make that argument, right? But they are. So when you always have to get the data, look at the data, because a lot of what you hear and a lot of what you see may not be the actual case. So, and I know I went around the corner and up and down the hill to answer your question, but the moral of that story is, yes, we're having the conversations. Yes, we do see the rates and how they fluctuate. However, for certain populations, it has remained the same across the board. Yeah.
All right, so we briefly talked about this at our meeting a couple hours ago, but I just wanted to touch upon it again because I think we kind of got cut off at the end. So on the issue of affordability, then there have been these statewide cuts. There's been other cuts that might be happening at the federal level. CUC is balancing its budget between having less revenue coming in, but also trying to serve all the same populations. And so the end result of that is you have to raise tuition, you have to have cuts, you have to have some sort of combination. And so in terms of that, I'm kind of curious about like what specifically have the UC Regents looked into in terms of being able to manage that budgetary situation. If we were to keep programs as they are, then it sounds like there's going to be a pretty large tuition increase because you have to get the money from somewhere. And if you do cut programs, how does that affect students? And also, I'm kind of curious because it sounds like cuts are probably necessary to some extent. Then how do the UC regions decide what the balance is between cuts and tuition increases? Would it be possible to have more cuts? Any cuts are bad, but would it be possible to have more cuts and then through that you can lower tuition? Fewer cuts, less tuition increases. But yeah, like what are the criteria they use to measure like and do that balance? Also, like what specifically are the UC regions looking into?
Well, it already put out its budget and its proposal to the state. So what's done is done. Like, there's not going to be any more cuts, I mean, tuition increases or anything, especially for 2025 to 2026, because was already, I guess, done in that capacity and everything else. What it is looking at right now is campuses, and I think we're going to get it at this meeting, actually have to come and give a report back of all the things that they're going to cut and the ways that they're going to expand their budget. So, like, for example, departments had a lot of hirings opening, but now they have to, like, take those hiring backs. Like, oh, we really need another HR specialist, but psych, we can't hire another one because now we have to cut our budget. So we'll see like a lot of that, like the capacity really lower. We're also like, it's important to know that UCOP is really advocating at the state level because what we're seeing is like that the state isn't valuing what the CSU and the UC does for not only the state, the country, the world. Like we're like the number one leading institution across the world, right? And so it seems like, you know, our governor and our people at the state legislation don't really understand that. And so we're going to see a lot of advocacy coming from us, the student regents, and the UCOP to say, like, don't give us a $500 million cut. And you say that you're going to give us back what you're cutting this year, next year, but we don't know if that's really going to happen. And with these fires, that's costing California a lot of money. And then with all these federal cuts, like that's going to cost it more money. So really, like saying to the state, like we can't continue to thrive as an institution under this is also what it's doing in the advocacy. But I think you are going to see a lot of cuts to programming and reevaluating things, and it's going to hurt. But I think it's important to know that like it's coming at the state and the federal level, and I think at the federal level it's, you know, the breakdown of all our grants, like we're losing 600 million just in like if they all go through the cuts to uh, NSF grants, 600 million across, and that's how the UC makes most of its money through our hospitals and through this research. So that's really going to hurt us. And I think we know now elections have consequences, and this one is having such a huge consequence on our community and our campuses. And so I'm not going to lie and tell you that isn't going to hurt, but I also think that the UC is going to be really creative in this next couple of months about like, well, how do we maximize what we do have? And we've been advocating there as well.
And part of that same story is that in order to minimize the amount of cuts that they are projecting, they are trying to find alignment within certain positions and or departments that can absorb some of the tasks, right? So even though some of the positions may be eliminated, the how do I say, the not the requirements, but the whatever the position did is still going to be utilized in the department. It just may either mean that a person has to take on more, or that particular job that they were hiring for is being divvied up between people in the department, or an intern can take it, right? So when Josiah said that they're being really creative, they are. They're really trying to be creative. And then the other part to this is that once, you know, we have this fee system where students pay, you know, their registration fees or their fees and so on and so forth, and then a percentage of that is we receive interest, you know, from that. That is part of the reserves. We didn't know that this era, this ecology was going to happen, right? None of us knew. And so some of those reserves may be able, and these are the conversations that we have with the CFO, with the VPs and stuff like that, can those reserves be utilized for, right? And they're like, if a campus is in dire strait or needs something like immediately, like for instance, the fires, did we anticipate that? Absolutely not. But those funds can be repurposed to help campuses get out of their dire straits, right? So everything that comes from our student fees is recycled. And I don't know if you guys knew this. Let me ask you a question. What is the percentage of student fees? Am I saying that for out of 100%? What is the percentage of student tuition in that? I don't even know if I'm saying it. So if I have a pie represents 100%. Look, we gonna get real basic. What is the sliver of that pie that student tuition makes up? Does anybody know? Of the entire budget for the UC system? Okay, we have 15. I know. Anybody else? What does student tuition make up in the UC institution operation? Anybody? Okay, we can be here all night. 5%. 5% of the UC budget is made from student tuition. Did y'all didn't know that, but that was remarkable when we found out. We're like, only 5%? Yes, only 5%. And 2% of that 5% is then oh no, I'm sorry. And then 30% of that goes into financial aid. So 30% of that 5% is what financial aid is what we use for financial aid. Did y'all know that? Mm-mm. And then, of course, he does, yeah, because of who he works for. I know. And then there's a 2% that is utilized for the interest. That is what we're talking about. How can we repurpose that? And that is the reserve, so to speak, that is used for emergencies, right? So when you look at the total gamut of where we kind of fit, we're 5% and 95% is everybody else. That's remarkable. When you, I mean, that's what I should have said was the myth of coming into this position that we only make up 5%. So I hope I answered the question. I don't even remember what the question was now.
It's all good. I do think, and I don't want to take up all the time, but I do think I saw that only like 25% of UC total spending like goes to education. So like most of it's going to research or administration or other costs as well. Just to put context on it. Um,
And some of that stuff
Yeah.
is education, right? Like research for like graduate students and in your classes. So
yeah, yeah, it's certainly very complicated. But I think it's when you look at the grand scheme of things, minorities going to education, minorities coming from tuition. But yeah, I do want to follow up just to make sure I get a really good answer to the one question. Oh yeah, do we have to move on for time or?
We do have to move on for time, and there are other people who want to ask questions, but sorry, y'all can connect afterwards.
Okay, all right.
Yes, thank you. Also, just quick time check. There is about 15 minutes left in this town hall. Yeah, we're gonna pass it off to our next individual.
Thank you. I kind of want to go back to opportunity for all. And we're talking about cuts to funding, and that was one of the reasons why it got vetoed after it passed overwhelmingly in the state Senate and the state assembly. And just given the climate, right, we're talking about protecting undocumented students. This is a bill that would support their opportunity to get a job on campus. And I think one of the things that a lot of us are wondering, is what will the board do if it's reintroduced and it's passed again, to ensure that, this could be a policy that's implemented to give students, undocumented students, an opportunity to work on campus, provide for themselves as they pay out of state tuition, right? And they have to put themselves through college in our system.
yeah, I think this is a great question. And we'll see if it's reintroduced to the state. I don't know if it will pass under Gavin and in this climate, but I think hindsight is 2020, and this is such a um, because if it came back on the board again, this was something I would easily vote for, but it's also one that President Drake had hindsight on that we all who are very passionate about this issue maybe didn't, because what would have happened right now is if we did pass opportunity all is there would have been a list, right? Because we would have to hire everybody and there would be a list of undocumented students and all that data. And then all it takes is for the federal government to say that we want forgetting the legal term right now, but we want the evidence. There's a legal term for that. We want like all the data, etc., for all the people who you hired who were undocumented, and then it would have, they would have came after us. And not only would they have come after us as undocumented people, they would have come at every single HR person who was involved in that process because they would have deemed it as illegal, like they're deeming everything else right now, right? So like. It's one of those things where like President Drake's hindsight in if there was a Trump presidency actually saved us rather than hurt us, because like there would have been a list that we couldn't erase in the same capacity that we may be seeing data, kind of taken away right now to protect our students. Like that would have been impermanently shrined because we would have had, tax forms, IDs, like, work numbers and all that. So it's a twofer, and that like I think the benefit of it is so needed, but under this administration, what does it look like to have an opportunity for all? It's a question that I think about. It's a question I think you all should think about. I don't think it erases the value and what we need for opportunity for all and fighting for it and fighting the federal government for it, but also being very pragmatic about the dangers that it also brings our community when our names become enshrined in list for us to be out there. How scary that is.
And I think that when we received, I think the correspondence, it wasn't even something from the regents as it was more from the governor, um, when he, said no. And again, we don't know if it was the forward thinking or the foresight that both he and President Drake had, right? Because if you could think about the the catastrophic measures that would be happening right now if we had that data. Um, it would just be horrendous, right? But I think the other thing is that it provides us with an opportunity to now be creative. So we all know that there, is the lawsuit, but how can we circumnavigate through this these murky waters to change the dynamic to where it's still benefiting the same population, but it's either worded different or our processes are different. Because if we continue with the same cookie cutter approach that has been denied and has not passed, why are we keeping the same approach, right? Why are we keeping the same ingredients to this particular recipe when they're not working? So again, that provides us with an opportunity to be creative and think about how can we meet the needs of these students that are a population that need them the most, you know? Yeah. That's a great question, and we just had this conversation. And the good thing is that our attorneys are also looking for words, right? And they're putting these words into
Chat
the system.
GPT. I'll find
Okay.
another one.
Amen. Right. And it's so funny that you mentioned that. So the answer to your question is yes. However, the wonderful workings of the UC system, we're not the number one public institution in the world by accident, right? So we're also putting these words into our databases and into our scholarships and fellowships and so on and so forth, just to meet the minimum requirement of what is coming down from this administration to ensure that not only are we following the protocol, but we're still applying to things and writing up grants and fellowships and proposals the way that they should be written, and with our own personal spin, right? So like I always say, that there's a way to say something without saying it, and our people. The good thing about it is y'all got a whole host of people that are behind y'all and supporting y'all, right? And these people that y'all don't see, y'all don't even know exist, but because of their, not only their positions, but their passions, this is stuff that's already coming down the pikes. So, yeah. But to answer your question again, yes and yes.
Hi. You've both mentioned the injunction that was placed on the president's executive orders circulating DEI, but the injunction also fails to address a letter that was released by the Department of Education. I know you mentioned it previously about how it targets certain cultural celebrations, as well as certain programs, things like housing and other academic programs. But a lot of these equity-based programs are also connected by multiple identities, such as first generation, transfer students, as well as other non-traditional groups. And I know you've mentioned what the UC is planning on doing for the short term, such as risk management. What's the long term plan that you guys have going?
Well, I'll say this briefly and then I'll let Josiah in. Um, the long-term plan for what we can see is status quo, right? Until something else comes down. And that is, we just continue to function the way that we're functioning because we have been functioning this way for so long. The other part to this is, and I'm sorry, I started thinking about something else before I was saying this, so I kind of forgot, but we're going to continue to move the way that we've been moving. And oh my God, I cannot believe I just had a brain fart. Let me have him go ahead and speak, and then I'll come back to it.
Well, and I think we have to distinguish like letters from executive orders from this. See, energy here. We already knew because like he doing this every day, where it's like he'll put out a letter, then he'll be like, "No, we rescinded that statement." But it's like, "Now we really go do that." Then it's like on his social media, "Now we not doing that." Like it's like every other day, right? It's like take some lithium or something. We gotta figure out like what we doing here, right? So like we're seeing a lot of that until it's signed into law and like it finishes in the courts, and I mean like really finishes in the court, like supreme level, like it's all up in the air. That's the honest thing. Like you guys know the bureaucraticness that it takes to get something done at the UC system. Like now, and we're like this tiny. Could you imagine trying to get that done at the federal level? Like when you have like the courts suing him or people suing him at the courts. Congress. Hopefully, we can change that in the next midterms. Like, there's a lot that like takes for a lot of these things to come into motion, and like there will be a day without him. I mean, you already see it right now. People are getting really upset under his presidency because he's not following through with his promises, right? And so that's why students ask us all the time, what can we do right now? It's getting yourselves activated to vote, because when you see how many people sat out at this election, and Sonia and I, like, we went everywhere trying to get people to vote, but people were sitting out, and we see how like people sitting out or making a certain decision is now affecting every single person, and we give him the opportunity to be like, I won the popular vote. That pisses me off more than anything. Like,
I don't
we
know
know
what you
just
was
the fact
popular by.
right, like just the fact that you could brag about that. So I think like really getting out and vote. There's three special elections coming up right now, two in Florida, one in New York. Obviously that doesn't apply to us, but what we could do is get active, start mobile calling. This was my past work before I started on the board. I was door to door organized and being like, hey, would you vote for this? Like that's what we could do now with like getting people activated in those areas, because if we could just get like the house, if that's all we could get and that's our measure, that's one more step that he has to go through to make his life harder. And so right now, that's what we have to do, is just get ourselves activated and get our people out to vote, because especially our young demographic from 18 to 26 turns out the lowest when it comes to voting.
And then about the letter specifically, and this is something that I always tell my students, read the footnotes, because you can find out so much information, more information about what that document is about by reading the footnotes. And in the footnotes, it clearly identifies that that department cannot make any laws nor rules. OCR cannot make any laws, cannot make any rules. So that entire letter that ironically is from the department that, because everyone who knows me knows that I want to become the Secretary of Education.
And will be.
Amen. We're gonna have to jump some hurdles, but that's okay. I'm built for this. And so when you read that letter, and especially if it's coming from, the Department of Education, when you read that footnote, it says we can't make any laws. We cannot change any laws. We can't do anything other than send out this letter. And we already know that that letter was a directive that they had to send out that was in this kind of antagonistic type of
Fear-mongering.
yeah, fear-mongering type of message, right? But it really can't do anything because of from whence it came, right? So if there's nothing else that you remember from this time that we spent together, read the footnotes.
And not read Project 2025. Like they gave us their playbook. So you got to think around that, be creative. Like I'm telling our regents to do that. Like we all have to read that because they slow, y'all. They gave us their playbook, like, and they're following it, like page by page. They are following it, and so we have to read that and think around it and think preemptively, and also follow what fascist governments do because that's what we're seeing right now. I think that's a
And
big
he's the
word.
real president, the author of 2025, Project 2025.
Right.
That's the real president.
So it's really important that we read these things and we think creatively around this because it's too sharp. And don't be so reactive. Like I know, like right now, it's like everything that they push now. We want to cuss somebody out, yell, flip a table over, but we can't. Like that is exactly what they want us to do. They want to tire us out. They want to like waterboard us with information. We have to be strategic. Very, very strategic, pick and choose our battles, know what's trying to get us riled up versus what's just real. And so really, really be strategic and don't just like get mad at every single thing happening because that's what they want. They want us to turn against one another and they want us to turn against them to prove them right.
And this is the last thing, because I know that we're at time, and just perfect segue from what my counterpart just said. This is one of the most divisive times that we're facing right now, and it's literally turning people against each other that were once friends or comrades or community members, families, right? So if anything, the only way that we're really going to be successful and get through this period of time is to align. If it's not, culturally, it can be a culture at UCLA for students, for certain specific, like populations, like students with dependents, or students that are facing, food insecurity or housing insecurity. But one thing is, please don't let this divide us. If anything, please allow it to bring us closer together to fight with one another. Okay. Thank y'all for coming.
Thank you guys so
you.
much.
Okay. Thank you everyone for coming both in person and on Zoom for this event and everything. Just before y'all leave, we want to plug two major events that are going on this week. So tomorrow, 6 to 7:30 p.m., our DVP office is hosting a Regents teach-in and a public comment workshop. The Regents are coming to UCLA in 2 weeks during finals, and they usually have pretty packed agendas for this time because they know students hardly show up and show out because of the inconvenience. So if you want to learn more about how the UC governs itself, also learn how to give public comment, also, just, make friends with folks who, are interested in enacting change here at the UC, please come out. It's going to be a hybrid event on Zoom and in Public Affairs 1256. So if you definitely don't want to walk all the way across campus like I don't, even though I'm going to be there, you can log in through Zoom. And then on Thursday, there's going to be a time, place, and manner policy teach-in with a political science professor, Professor Graham Blair, at 5:30 p.m. in Kirchhoff 417. For those of you who don't know, UCLA is actually going to come out with revised time, place, and manner policies in like less than a week. So we're going to be kind of going over the new changes that are being made and everything, and more so address like how this sort of affects our lives as students, as activists, as protesters, etc. But yeah, again, thank you everyone for coming. If you guys have any additional questions for the student regents while they're still here, please kindly take it outside because USAC is going to be starting soon. But yeah.
Well, everyone, just a quick announcement. Thank you once again for showing up. Those, please feel free to take extra food. If you haven't signed in,